A father and daughter travel to an alien world in search of treasure. What could go wrong, right? Well, that's the premise of the 2018 film Prospect, written and directed by Zeke Earl and Chris Caldwell, and starring Pedro Pascal and Sophie Turner. Now, the story begins just like that. A father and a daughter travel to an alien moon to search for alien gems. And simple enough, right? Unfortunately, they're happened upon very early on in the film by two scavengers, Pedro Pascal and an unknown partner. After a disastrous first meeting, unfortunately, Pedro and Sophie Turner, Ezra and C, they are left to form a kind of uneasy alliance, for obvious reasons, and the name of the game goes from treasure hunt to survival story. In other words, like, they have to get off the moon. Because very early on in the film, it's established that there's only one transport out of here, and if they miss their window, then both of them, no matter how much treasure you have, doesn't really mean much unless you can spend it, obviously. So this film was actually very surprisingly satisfying. When it comes right down to it, I was not really expecting a sci-fi treasure hunt survival flick to have all of these elements work concisely and succinctly together, and yet it does. I was actually really surprised at how much I enjoyed it. For some reason, it honestly reminds me of kind of a mix of The Outer Worlds and the Coen Brothers version of True Grit. It had a very organic and natural feel to both the pacing and the conflict. Obviously, these are Ezra and C. C is Sophie's character. They don't trust each other, and so normally there's a few notes in a script where there's a sort of like a time of bonding, but all of these usual methods to get to that point don't really factor in here, and I really like that because it makes the characters feel a lot more realistic. So, as I mentioned, it's really simple when it gets right down to it. You have a enemy mine situation, and both of these characters have to begrudgingly help each other. So, that being said, like I said, obviously, I enjoy the film. So now I'm going to just break down some likes and dislikes. Okay, so first point, as far as like light, setting. It's beautiful and organic. Their outside scenery, it takes place, I don't know, like it looks like an upper northwest, maybe like rainforest. Something that you don't really see in a lot of sci-fi films is a kind of like natural scenery. A lot of what we tend to get is kind of a cramped, congested, like metropolitan or technological space, which being sci-fi you kind of halfway expect. I mean, the spectacle of most sci-fi is supposed to be a futuristic, modern like setting. It takes certain notes from other like sci-fi films that, okay, if you want a simplistic setting for your alien world, well, you go out into the woods. That has its strengths and its drawbacks. If done inappropriately, it looks like all you did was set up your characters to just wander aimlessly in the woods. And that seems cheap and hokey. Whereas like here, the setting for a lot of this is just adds to the survival situation, because most of the time our characters are in these kind of like hazmat suits or astro suits, whichever you prefer to call them, because this moon, this alien atmosphere, is poisonous. It's filled with certain unknown toxins, but the danger that these characters exist in is ever present. And so as they trek to somehow like get off of this moon, it always feels like they are kind of outflanked and they're constantly just being overwhelmed by their environment. And so, like, that's the first good point. Dialogue. This has a Emerson-esque sort of feel to the wording that is used, or kind of like if you've ever seen the film Bone Tomahawk or Gretel and Hansel. I'm a sucker for strong dialogue and how that assists in like storytelling. I think we've kind of gotten a bit too used to trying to unnaturally fit in like modern slang or cool speak with regards to who our characters are and having them convey their ideas. You have the tough guy who's usually very limited vocabulary, limited line reads. You have someone who's really emotional and over the top, then they just don't stop talking. But it feels refined. It has a kind of old-timey feel to it, but it's very utilitarian and it's very necessary. The wording and the script work is just, it's top-notch, like I said. Once again, it feels very similar to a film or films, very like Bone Tomahawk or Gretel and Hansel. Wonderful. After that, pacing, which I already kind of like alluded to, it's loose and natural. Like nothing really like feels rushed. It feels, as pacing goes, it feels very episodic. First, the father and the daughter land on the moon. Next, they run afoul of these two outlaws. And then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's very episodic, and that just kind of keeps you invested because you don't know what's going to happen. Usually, in your kind of like cookie cutter sci-fi movies or sci-fi stories, you can get a pretty easy grasp as to exactly what's going to happen next, but not really with this one. This one just kind of takes its time and just let action and consequence just go as they will, and it just has a very natural feel to it. Like I said, nothing is rushed, and everything just sort of feels like it's meant to happen in sequence. The story is very, very organic in that way. The performances. The performances. Ezra is very much the sophisticated, kind of pragmatist outlaw. When I made the description of the Outer Worlds, there's a number of different characters in there that have kind of a Western feel that may or may not be your ally 5 minutes from now. Ezra, you don't know exactly what he's thinking at any given time. We know that he's, like looking out for number one, essentially, but we don't know how far he will, maintain any particular alliance. He has the bulk of the dialogue in this, and Pedro Pascal just does a wonderful job executing the script. Sophie, she does a good job. Like, I don't know the age of the actress, but it's clear that she has a decent balance of the tension and the vulnerability that her character is supposed to have, and just having that play out very well on screen when she has her moments. So once again, I don't know how old that actress is, but I think she has a bright future, honestly. Now, for some dislikes. Not a whole lot as far as like dislikes are concerned. One of the few dislikes that I had was it has a limited soundtrack. Music, strong dialogue, and strong soundtrack will usually just like, yes, that'll do it. I'm pretty much set. You can almost like put anything like on the screen as long as it has like an excellent script and excellent music. I'm all in. The film Prospect doesn't really have a very set or a very strong soundtrack. Most of it is ambient synth or violin, I think I heard, like every now and then. I've seen this twice, and it's really hard for me to kind of like piece it back together by memory, because aside from ambient electric, in the background, I can't really like place it. It's very sparse, and sometimes, as a call from from the director or producer or whoever's in charge of this. They want to let the scenes just kind of breathe on their own, not necessarily being too influenced by by musical ambiance. In this case, I didn't really like that. I thought that they could have used a little bit more musical garnish in certain scenes, or at least to emphasize the feel of certain scenes. That being said, it's not really like a bad, too much of like any kind of handicap. It's just something like, I would have preferred a little bit more. I would have preferred a little bit more, either like variety or a little bit more just in general, like additions to their soundtrack. But aside from that, the audio quality. Sometimes, like, even though I mentioned that I do really enjoy like the dialogue, sometimes because once again they're always in kind of like a hazmat or like a survival like gear, it's sometimes hard to understand what is being said on screen. And that being said, you can usually just set subtitles to this, but I really don't like having to do that as a means of understanding what's happening in a scene. I don't, because if I have a difficult time with that, then I have to I have to rewind, and that takes me out of the moment. So, unfortunately, that's a small setback. I really only have like 2 bullet points of dislike when it comes to the overall experience, but Prospect is it's a rare gem. It's something that I wasn't expecting to find, and I was really happy that I did. Once again, Pedro Pascal. If you don't know who Pedro Pascal is by name, you know the name Oberon Martell. Yes, that's Pedro. He fares a lot better in that, like, without going into spoilers, he fares a lot better than his tenure on Game of Thrones. And he is pretty much bearing a good amount of the story on his shoulders. Undoubtedly because he's the more experienced actor, and also based on where the characters are, you have an inexperienced young woman who's trying to navigate a very dangerous situation for herself, and you have an experienced sort of outlaw, that, given a begrudging alliance, he's willing to help her out. And he does a decent job with that, like, I'm not entirely sure, like, if this is like in a gaming setting, if I would 100% trust Ezra, but with the work that Pedro Pascal does with this character, it's excellent. This, like, you don't know if he's going to remain loyal or if he's going to exploit any given situation. So before I become redundant gushing back over the performances, overall, I would say that this sci-fi treasure hunt survival film is definitely worth a watch. And I was once again, I was surprised at how much I overall enjoyed it. And I think if you were to give it a watch, you would appreciate it too. So I give it a very strong recommendation. I saw it on Netflix. I'm not sure if there's other streaming services that offer it, but if you can, seek it out. It's worth your time, certainly. So with that is my review of 2018's Prospect. Thank you once again for joining me on Movie Ninja. If you like this review, please give it a like, subscribe, leave a comment. All right, and I will see you later.